I try very hard to avoid reality TV. In fact, for the most part, I avoid television altogether. But I, I find I'm constantly being asked to talk about reality TV. In fact, I'm doing some sort of conference in about a month's time up in Leeds, I think, and a festival, and I'm on a panel talking about I presume the downside of reality TV. I can't think of any upside at all. I mean, I think it's a very entertaining form of television if you like that sort of stuff. It's beautifully produced, but it's about opening yourself to a form of manipulation which ends up, certainly over a protracted period of time, with a loss of agency. And that is very hard to get back, and particularly if you don't have people around you like managers you can trust, or unions who have your back, agents who are looking for the next job so that you can move on, so you can get out of the clasp of these production people. And unfortunately, because Johnson called his election in 2019, 5 years ago, the investigation into the problems with Jeremy Kyle, was it Jeremy Kyle, and Love Island, was never concluded, and the committee broke off halfway through hearing evidence. So it mostly heard evidence from production staff and from producers. I think it heard evidence from four people who were involved in the shows directly on television, for contestants, that's what they want to call themselves, for participants. And I don't think that's a very good range of information. And the result was, of course, that production companies got exactly what they wanted, and they now have control over participants for the next 18 months after the show has finished filming. This is a level of control which is unlike any other media exploitation. And yes, it means they might be paying for psychiatry, but it means they're also controlling that. And they have used psychiatry to predict what people are going to do in front of the camera and so on. It's a very manipulative and a very soul-destroying process. Believe me, I know, I've been through it. When it's good, it's rather like trying to reproduce the drama of EastEnders without having to have a script, because you get the right, if you cast it right, you get the right selection of people, and on camera, under the right circumstances, there will be energetic interaction. And certainly that's what I found. I loved the actual show. I was on a show called The Circle. But I hated the aftermath. I thought the aftermath was vile. And the 18 months immediately after the show was such a whirlwind of anxiety. And it had nothing to do with fame or the loss of fame. It was to do with the loss of agency and a feeling that I had lost control over my own life. And I've spoken to other people since, and they have assured me that they have the same experience, a similar experience. And I know people who had a far worse experience. And the media seems to connive with production companies to put out an idea that when there are suicides, and there have been many, this is because somebody can't deal with fame or the loss of fame. Complete rubbish. They realize their life is no longer theirs, and they are manipulated and cajoled, and there's no upside to this. I wrote an article for The Independent sometime after my show had aired, and I said the 18 months immediately following the show were sheer hell, worse than being held at gunpoint, which has happened to me. And then I had cancer, And when the tumour was removed, and it was cut, and it was it was hit and miss whether or not I survived. I didn't think I was going to. The tumour was frankly enormous, and when it was removed, the consultant said that it was about 18 months old. It looked like an engorged carrot. And I thought I'd had a very lucky escape. But notice the parallel. 18 months of misery, 18 months tumour. I can't say that's anything more than an anecdotal link. It's certainly not a legal link. But it might give you some idea of how stressful it is, that level of manipulation. More than that, when it comes back and you find that people are trying to manipulate you again, the level of PTSD is phenomenal. And I was very much aware a couple of weeks ago of somebody accessing my phone, hacking my phone, and it just triggered everything. And I'm sort of getting back to normal now, and I'm rather relieved. But it gave me 3 weeks of consummate anxiety with very little support. Because, we're a very small group of people. Very small. And that support system isn't there, really. You've either moved on or you've gone quiet. And anyway, I am always grateful for a smile in the street, and that's that keeps you going, sort of thing. Keeps you going, puts things into perspective. But let's look at the curious world of reality TV and its latest aristocratic entrants, the Fulfords and the Rees Moggs, because there's an article today in the Daily Telegraph. I'm just sort of leafing through today's edition of the Daily Telegraph. It's in the range of newspapers that I look at, the Telegraph tends to be one of the last, but it's always very entertaining. Both families, emblematic of a British upper-class lineage, well, the Rees-Moggs are sort of a bit jumped up in their way, but anyway, they've stepped into the spotlight of reality TV. But beneath the allure of fame, there is a cautionary tale, and I hope mine helps to set the scene. But Eddie Fulford also speaks very firmly of the downside. His family was on a show called The Effing Fulfords and Life is Tough, and he warns of the dangers of reality TV. These shows promised a glimpse into the daily lives of the eccentric and privileged, but it came with unintended consequences. Fulford says, on these shows, the only person who is going to make you look like an idiot is you. Is not entirely true. But if you are going to look like an idiot, you will be found out. And it highlights a critical issue, the loss of control over public image. Once the footage is in the hands of the producers, the narrative can be spun in any direction, often accentuating the most absurd and controversial aspects of one's life. Now, if one knows about these things, if one is self-aware, that is fine. But if as in the case of the Fulfords and the case of the Rees-Moggs, there are children involved, children are not necessarily as aware. And I remember That's Life, the Esther Ranson show, used to do the same sort of thing, asking children astonishing questions and letting the children lie and make up the most ridiculous answers. And it was fun, of course, but uncomfortable viewing, I'm sure, for the children as they've now got older and they find these clips on YouTube. For the Rees-Moggs, poised to star in Meet the Rees-Moggs, I think this warning should serve as should be a stark warning. unlike scripted dramas, reality TV thrives on sensationalism, and the Fulford people, their family's initial naivety, expecting a 6 p.m. PG show, only to find themselves in rather R-rated spectacle. The Fulfords were portrayed as a blend of comedic dysfunction and aristocratic eccentricity, unfiltered and raw, and this portrayal, while entertaining, is misleading and reductive, reducing complex individuals to mere caricatures. And that's just what happens on screen after screen, and that survival afterwards, where it extends beyond mere misrepresentation. Reality TV can expose participants to harsh public scrutiny, amplified in today's digital age. Fulford mentions the odd nasty comment on social media, but it goes so much further than that. Social media is simply a reminder of how public exposure can lead to unexpected criticism and judgment, and Rees Mogg himself may be used to that, but are his children, is his nanny. For children like the Rees Mogg brood, growing up under such scrutiny can be particularly challenging. The exposure to public commentary and the portrayal of a particular version of themselves, because it's not them, one might not even recognise what is on television, can have lasting impacts on a child's sense of identity and self-worth. I think that's my own tuppence halfpenny's worth. But the biggest thing is this question of agency. While the Fulfords enjoyed a degree of spontaneity, as Fulford reminisces about the unscripted chaos of the show, it's a double-edged sword. The lack of direction can lead to moments that participants may later regret, and this brings us to a fundamental flaw of reality TV. It offers a distorted reality, curated for maximum entertainment, rather than an accurate representation of life. And the show is more important than the people. And what is offered during the process of the show is to keep you on the road, is lies and flibbity-gibbets and rubbish. And nobody can be held to account because you don't know who these people are. The runners and the producers disappear. You never hear from them again. And you're suddenly left with PR people and boffins who take control of they literally take control of your life. And, the idea of the Rees-Moggs sharing their lives on screen might seem like harmless fun, or even a lucrative venture. The idea of Prince Harry sharing his life on screen. It's essential to remember the lessons from the Fulfords' experience. Reality TV, with its voyeuristic allure, demands a heavy toll, a loss of control over one's image, a loss of control over one's life, the risk of misrepresentation, the invasion of privacy, the savage portrayal of maybe your worst self. Scenes edited out of order. It didn't happen to me. I had a really good edit. Don't misunderstand. I had a really good edit, but it happened to other people. Other people had their scenes edited out of order to make them look savage. There's a fellow who I was supposed to be locked into confrontation with. I wasn't. I thought he was an absolute charmer. But his scenes were not entirely in order. And we've talked about that. And Fulford sagely advises that you can't bend to the 1% of people who are going to find you offensive, yet the exposure inevitably opens the door to such judgments. So we might meet the Rees-Moggs, but we should do so with a critical eye, and so should they. And remember the complex reality behind the polished veneer of reality TV. It's not just about entertainment. It's about a loss of agency. It's about the very real lives and the reputations of those who dare, or who are persuaded to, or who can are tricked into stepping into the limelight, because the illusion which is put out is that you volunteer, you ring up and you say, or you fill in a form and you say, oh, I'd like to be in this wonderful show, I'd like to win a prize. That's not the reality. The reality is you're telephoned out of the blue. I mean, I was in Cambridge, it was raining, and the telephone call came, and would I like to be in this show? And you're terribly flattered. And there's so little time to make a decision. And of course, when it's raining in Cambridge and miserable, you'll say yes to anything. And the production and the persuasion is extreme during those during that short fortnight before the show takes place. And it's intense. And you think, well, why not? Why not do it? I've got a month free, and they say, oh, you'll only be wanted for the first week. And something happens, and you sort of find yourself feeling comfortable in that environment. I found it very comfortable. But while there are people like Fulford warning you about the show, nobody warns you about what's afterwards. Except they talk about fame and the loss of fame, and that's nothing. That's nothing. I still walk down the street and people stop me. I mean, it's not as extreme as it was in the weeks after, months after the show, where taxi drivers would lean out of their cabs in London and scream out my name. I thought it was extraordinary, and it was almost impossible to walk down a street to the railway station without having to stop again and again and again to pose for selfies. But the environment that you're kept in the television is like the sort of environment that prepares somebody for torture. It's basically R21 technique, where you lose time, you lose control, you have this overwhelming heat, you have this, you're told when to eat, when to go to the loo. You have a camera on you 24 hours a day. You have voices giving you direction, telling you what to do, what not to do, asking you whether or not you meant to say something, asking you to say it again. These little imperatives gradually whittle down your agency until you suddenly realize you are so compliant, you will give your telephone number to somebody who asks you in the street. And I did, on many an occasion. And that's part of the problem. And my partner, who is a torture victim, has told me, we talked about this years and years and years ago, how that R21 technique preceded the torture itself. The entrapment in a cage, the confinement, the removal of watches and phones, the overwhelming heat, the commands about little things, the segregation, the denial of sleep, the strange hours of working, the constant interrogation. That's reality TV. It's a very small move on from there to the compliance that allows some ghastly individual the option of going further. Torture. You're very well primed. And the British Army are trained to resist torture by going through the R21 technique, which was developed by the British Army and the Israeli Army. But they only do a weekend. And they've got lots and lots of psychiatric support to help them. I did a month of this. And 5 years down the line, I still have PTSD when I feel my phone has been hacked, when I feel somebody has taken over control and is not telling me the truth. I still have flashbacks. I still wake up in the middle of the night, convinced that there's a particular type of medicine that the doctor has prescribed to me that I'm not taking. There isn't. And in fact, I have a piece of paper by my bedside now, and I write things down, and what I wake up to in the morning is a series of complete gobbledygook about anxiety and about what I must do and what I haven't done. And none of it is real. And all of this is a manifestation of the stress that I experienced after coming out of the circle, and it's been reignited by all of this fear about having my life taken over again. And I find solace in doing the humdrum stuff like animation, and just churning out videos in a sort of because the mind is then focused on something different, and or teaching when there's lessons to teach because the mind is focused on something different. But when the mind is free, when I'm not busy doing something, my goodness, the demons. There's lines in Samson Agonistes by Milton about how these things like hornets attack you. You can't get rid of them. And particularly at night, you sort of half dreaming, half waking, and you think these very strange thoughts. And and I'm a dreadful sleepwalker and a sleep talker as well. I've now become a sleep writer, and that's quite useful. So at least I now have a record of the rubbish that's going through my head. Anyway, I hope that's of some use, and I know I've mocked Rees Mogg in the past, and but I would urge him not to do this. I would urge him not to do it.